Baron Trump never sought to inherit the name. Yet one quiet night, his father summons him to a room no one enters. There, he hands him a cassette he never played, a diary he never read, and a secret about a brother the world forgot. What unfolds isn't about politics, it's about a fractured legacy, a buried truth, and a moment when a father finally stops pretending to reveal to his son who he truly is. This changes everything, not with noise, but with silence. The sun dipped below Palm Beach, casting a golden glow across the private pool's surface. Mar-a-Lago's windows captured the light, glowing as if the house were ablaze, though inside, it was still. The silence wasn't reverent, it was cautious, as if the estate, even in quiet, always held its breath. Baron Trump moved through it softly, tall, reserved, a shadow in the corners of chandelier-lit rooms. He didn't walk like someone who belonged, he walked like someone trying not to disturb an illusion. At 19, Baron was no longer the awkward boy the world once speculated about. He was lean, sharp-featured, resembling his mother more than his father. His voice, when he chose to use it, was deep, patient, measured, not from media training, but from watching his life unfold behind a two-way mirror. He didn't post, didn't argue, didn't play the game. He simply observed. That evening, he watched his father dine alone at a long mahogany table. Donald Trump had never been one for silence, he filled it like a general commanding a parade ground. But lately, he'd been quieter, slower. Tonight, he looked up and said something Baron never expected. "Stay a moment." Baron blinked. Of course. He sat across from the man the world never stopped watching. The room carried a faint scent of scotch and polished wood. The clink of silverware against fine china echoed, sounding out of place. Donald didn't look up, just cut another piece of steak and said softly, "Do you know where your name comes from?" Baron tilted his head. "You mean why you named me that?" Donald nodded. "I had a pseudonym I used when I wanted privacy. John Baron would call reporters, pretending to be someone else." A faint smile crossed his lips. "They always believed me." Baron said nothing. Donald continued, "I liked the name, it sounded clean, strong, like someone you couldn't ignore." He finally met Baron's gaze. "But you're not like that, are you?" Baron didn't flinch. "Do you want me to be?" Donald leaned back, surprising them both. "No. I think I'm tired of people trying to be what they're not." A silence stretched between them, not awkward, just long. Then Donald stood. "Come with me." Baron hesitated, not out of reluctance, but because this was unprecedented. His father didn't invite people in, he summoned them or sent others in his place. But tonight, he asked Baron to follow. They walked down a narrow hallway, past the portrait room, past a mirrored corridor rarely touched by footsteps. At the far end was a small door with a keypad. Donald entered a code. The lock clicked. He opened the door and let Baron inside. The room was simple, no gold, no velvet, just a heavy desk, a bookshelf, a filing cabinet, and in the corner, an old cassette player. Baron looked around, uncertain. Donald reached into a drawer and pulled out a box. Inside were an old photograph, a letter, and a cassette. He handed the photo to Baron, a young man in a pilot's jacket, smiling, hair tousled by the wind, eyes soft. "This is Freddie," Donald said quietly. Baron frowned. "Who?" Donald's voice softened. "My older brother." Baron froze. His father rarely spoke of family, nothing beyond buildings and cameras. But now, Donald's gaze drifted to a dusty photo on the shelf. "He died before you were born. Drank himself to death." Donald ran a hand over his face. He didn't want to be part of the business. Wanted to fly planes, be free. A pause. "I used to mock him for that." Baron sat slowly. The room felt heavier, like something unburied. He glanced at the cassette. "What's on it?" Donald hesitated. "I don't know." He mailed it to me a few years before he died. I never listened. Baron looked at him. Why not? A long silence followed. Because I already knew what he'd say. That night. After Baron went to bed, he couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling. He kept seeing his father standing in that room, holding the letter as if it weighed more than any lawsuit, scandal, or flag. For the first time, Baron saw not a wall of sound, but a man who had loved someone who didn't want to be him, and lost him. He sat up, wrote a note on hotel stationery, "I want to listen to the cassette with you." He slid it under the door of the small room where Donald often stayed to avoid the press, then returned to bed, waiting for a knock. Morning came slowly. Outside, Mar-a-Lago gleamed with its usual polished elegance. Staff moved quietly through the halls. Sunlight streamed through tall arched windows. Headlines roared elsewhere, but inside the room at the corridor's end, a room few knew existed, there was stillness. The world held its breath. Donald Trump sat in a worn leather chair, arms crossed. The cassette was already in the player, but he hadn't pressed play, not yet. An envelope from Baron rested on his lap, his son's note inside, "I want to listen to the cassette with you." An odd request, not for him, not against him, but with him. His throat tightened. He hadn't expected this. A knock came. He looked up. The door creaked open, and Baron stepped in quietly, no fanfare, no entourage, no cameras, just a son and father in a room with a voice neither had heard in decades. "Ready?" Baron asked. Donald hesitated, then reached forward and pressed play. A crackle sounded, then silence, then a voice, soft, measured, with a hint of mischief beneath the tone. "Hey, Donnie." The room stilled. "I figured you'd never listen to this, but I recorded it anyway. You were always better at headlines than me. You had the spark, the swagger. You filled rooms. I didn't want to. I liked the silence. I liked the sky." Donald closed his eyes. The voice felt like a ghost, not haunting, but familiar in a way that cracked him open. "I know you think I gave up. Maybe I did, but not the way you think. I didn't die because I was weak. I died because I couldn't reconcile pretending. And I see you now, on TV, in the papers, and I wonder if you remember who we were before we picked sides." Baron glanced sideways at his father. Donald was motionless, hands clasped tightly, eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a pained focus. Freddie's voice continued. "I don't need anything from you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to tell someone the truth one day, not about me, not about the company, not even about Dad. The truth about you." The tape clicked. Side A ended. Neither moved. Then Donald stood, walked slowly to the shelf, and picked up the letter Freddie had sent with the cassette, still sealed. He held it to his chest for a moment, then handed it to Baron. "Read it." Baron hesitated. "You sure?" Donald nodded. Baron opened it. Inside was a brief paragraph, handwritten, and signed, "If you're reading this, you're the only one who can break the loop. I lived like I didn't matter. You lived like you had to matter to everyone. We were both wrong. The truth is simple, you mattered, even when you were quiet." Baron looked up. "I think he wanted you to tell someone this." Donald didn't speak. In that moment, he looked older, not in years, but in waiting. Finally, he said, "I've told a lot of people a lot of things, but I never told anyone that." Baron folded the letter, held it a moment, then looked at him directly. "Tell me." Donald sat again, took a breath. "I was afraid I'd lose myself if I stopped performing." Baron didn't flinch, so Donald continued. "The world doesn't value your silence. They walk past you. They forget you. I wasn't going to let them forget me. But Freddie didn't care if they did, he just wanted to be free. And I punished him for that, for being what I couldn't be. The words weren't emotional, but they were raw, unpolished, rare. Baron leaned forward. "You were just scared, weren't you?" Donald blinked hard, then whispered, "Every day." The room remained still after the tape ended, no words, no movement, just a father and son sitting in a space where something old had finally spoken. Donald stood slowly and walked to the window. His reflection stared back, older. Grayer, sharper than he remembered. He spoke softly. "I never told anyone about this room, not even your mother." Baron nodded, still seated. "Why now?" Donald didn't answer at first, then turned. "Because for the first time, I don't feel like I'm hiding behind myself when I talk to you." He opened a drawer, pulled out something wrapped in faded cloth, and placed it carefully on the desk. He unwrapped it, a small, old leather-bound diary, its spine barely holding together, the cover inscribed with Ft. Frederick Trump. Donald's fingers brushed the cover gently. "Freddie wrote this during rehab. I visited him once. He gave it to me. I never opened it." He paused. "I was afraid of what I'd find." Baron reached for it but stopped. "Are you ready now?" Donald looked at him, eyes damp but not broken, just open. "Not alone." They opened the diary together, page by page. It wasn't angry or sad, it was full of moments, quiet observations, fears, memories. "Donnie always wanted to be bigger than the room. I just wanted to sit still and breathe without anyone asking why. He laughs like a hammer. I laugh like a window creaks. But I think we both wanted the same thing, not to be alone." Halfway through, one page stood out, written in larger, more hurried handwriting. "If I don't make it, give this to someone who still has a chance to choose. Don't give it to someone who wants the world. Give it to someone who wants to feel what's real inside them." Donald closed the diary gently and looked at Baron. "That's you." Baron sat in silence for a long time, then whispered, "Is this why you brought me here?" Donald nodded. "I didn't want to give you a brand, a company, or a name. I wanted to give you this, before the world tells you who you're supposed to be." Outside, a slow, warm southern rain began to fall, the kind that didn't demand shelter, only attention. Donald sat back, looking at his son, not through the lens of a dynasty, but through something far older, a father reaching across time. "You know, he wasn't weak." Baron nodded. "I know. And you're not quiet because you're afraid." Baron met his gaze. "I'm quiet because I don't want to speak someone else's words." Donald exhaled deeply, then said, "That's braver than anything I've ever done." That evening, Donald didn't watch the news, send emails, or take calls. He sat alone in the old room, the light dim, the cassette rewound, the diary beside him, and whispered, "Freddie, I told him." A pause. "You were right. He was the one to give it to." For 3 days, Baron barely spoke, not out of rebellion or shock, but reverence. He carried the diary with him, carefully, as if it might vanish if handled too quickly. He didn't open it in public or mention it when people asked what he was reading. He kept it close, like a compass he didn't yet know how to use. At night, he sat on the veranda with earbuds, pretending to listen to music, but he wasn't. He was thinking about the voice on the tape, the cracked tenderness in Freddie's words, the rare tremor in his father's voice. It felt like being handed a broken violin and told there was still music in it, he just didn't know how to play it yet. Since that day they listened, Donald had said little. He didn't return to the room with the cassette, didn't mention the diary, but something in him had shifted, subtly, but undeniably. That week, he didn't speak in slogans, didn't shout orders, didn't talk too much. He lingered longer in doorways, paused an extra second before replying. Once at breakfast, he asked Baron a question and didn't interrupt the answer. Baron noticed, and perhaps that was enough. On the 4th morning, Baron opened the diary again, this time flipping to the back. He found a page folded in half. Unfolding it, he read, If someone tells you that you must be loud to be strong, give them silence that doesn't yield. If they say men don't feel, show them the bruise you didn't hide. And if they hand you a legacy dipped in gold, ask which part of it bleeds. Barron read it twice, then closed the diary and went downstairs. His father was in the study, reading, not tweeting. Barron leaned against the doorframe. "Can I ask you something?" Donald looked up. "Anything." Barron held up the diary. "Did he ever tell you he loved you?" Donald hesitated, then shook his head. "No. But I think he did, in the way he looked at me when I was trying to win." Barron stepped inside. "You know the last time you looked at me like that?" Silence. Then Donald set the paper down, stood, and walked around the desk. He looked into his son's eyes. "I'm looking at you like that now." It wasn't emotional, no tears, but something passed between them, something that didn't need to be loud to be real. Barron nodded, left the diary on the desk, and said, "You can finish it. I've memorized my part." That night, Donald opened it, not as a book, but as a mirror. He read every word his brother wrote, small, angry, beautiful, jagged, unfinished. He turned to the last page and, for the first time in years, wrote something. "Freddie, thank you. You gave me what my billions never could, a second chance to be honest, to be still, to be a father. This time, I'll try to get it right." The next morning, Barron found a note slipped under his door, his name written in a familiar bold hand. Inside was one sentence: "Let's go somewhere quiet today, just us." For the first time in months, they drove without Secret Service, taking backroads, ending up at a small beach Donald hadn't visited since his teenage years. No press, no noise, just the wind and water. They walked side by side in silence, simply being. Donald picked up a stone, studied it for a moment, then tossed it into the waves. "You know, the ocean's the only thing that ever made me feel small. I think that's why I avoided it for so long." Barron crouched, watching the tide recede. "But small doesn't mean weak." Donald turned to him. "No. It means honest." As the tide pulled back, Barron did something he'd never done before. He stepped forward and placed a hand on his father's shoulder, not as a gesture of pity or a son forgiving a father, but as a man saying, "I see you." Donald didn't speak, just placed his hand on Barron's shoulder, and they watched the waves together. 3 months later, the estate was quiet again, not because the press stopped chasing them, but because they stopped running. The story didn't break, no leaks, no press learned of the room at the corridor's end, the tape, or the diary. Silence held, because some things, as Barron now understood, weren't meant to be shared with everyone, only with those who would carry them. He still had the letter Freddie wrote, keeping it folded in his wallet beside an old photo of his mother and a childhood drawing he'd made on the back of a campaign flyer, a stick figure holding a balloon labeled "Me." He hadn't known why he kept it all these years, until now. Now he understood. Donald didn't speak of Freddie after that week, not directly, but Barron noticed small changes: a full minute of silence before starting an interview, a pause before correcting someone, a single sentence to an aide, "Let's wait." Once, during a meeting with former advisors, someone commented on Barron's quietness. Donald didn't defend him, he didn't need to. He simply replied, "Still water reflects the sky best." The room fell silent, and something in Donald's voice ensured it stayed that way. On the evening of Barron's 20th birthday, Donald called him outside. The sunset was low and golden, clouds hanging over the sea like heavy silk. They stood at the edge of a garden path, no security, no cameras, just them. Donald reached into his coat and pulled out the diary, worn, soft, its pages marked. He handed it to Barron. "I only wrote on one page." Barron opened it. On the back, in bold, neat handwriting, was, "Son, I built towers, brands, a name that might outlive us both. But this? This is the first thing I built just for you, not to impress you, not to teach you, but to show you I knew." In the end, Being your father mattered more to me than any crowd I ever stood before. I may not have many days left to rewrite history, but I have enough time to tell you the truth. I'm proud of the man you're becoming, because you're building quietly. That takes more strength than I ever had. Barron closed the diary slowly, held it to his chest, and said quietly, "Thank you for not leaving this buried." Donald nodded. "Thank you for asking for it." Later that night, Barron sat alone on the balcony, watching the stars emerge. He wasn't sure what his future held. He didn't want the spotlight or to inherit an empire's machinery. But now he held something far more precise than power, a real choice. And somewhere that night, a decision came to him, not in thunder, but in silence. He wouldn't build louder, he'd build slower. He'd listen first, speak when it mattered, and he'd be the first Trump remembered not for the noise he made, but for the silence he kept. In another part of the house, Donald sat in his study, eyes closed. The diary was gone, passed on, but on his desk lay a single photo of Freddie smiling, and beside it, a recent picture of Barron by the sea. Donald looked between them, then whispered to himself, "The loop is broken." This concludes our narrative journey. I trust you found this gripping saga of intrigue, cutting-edge innovation, and astonishing discoveries captivating. From where are you tuning in today? I'm curious to learn which corner of the globe this tale has touched. If this escapade held your interest, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for a steady stream of compelling, mind-expanding stories just like this one. Fresh material is posted frequently, ensuring you're always in the loop for the newest spellbinding adventures. Be sure to pass this video along to your loved ones and friends. It's a great way to share positivity and insight while expanding our circle of story enthusiasts. Your encouragement is invaluable. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to welcoming you back for the next tale.